Hello and welcome to the Left Wing Podcast. It is Lions Test Match Week and there is plenty to talk about. I'm Will Slattery. I'm delighted to be joined for today's podcast by Luke Fitzgerald and by our man in Australia, Ruaidhri O'Connor. Before we get to all the build-up to this weekend's game, a reminder that this Saturday on the Irish Independent YouTube channel, myself, Cian Tracy and Bernard Jackman will be doing a Lions watch-along for the first test. We will have pre-match coverage, we will have half-time coverage and we will have post-match coverage, and for every minute during the game, we will be giving you live analysis and reaction. So hopefully some of you guys can come on the YouTube channel on Saturday. We'll be going live from around 10:30, 30 minutes before kickoff, and we'll be with you up till about, 1:30 or so afterwards. So there'll be plenty to discuss on Saturday. But for now, as I said, Ruaidhri O'Connor and Luke here with me. And Rud, I might go to you first. It's been a very interesting build-up since we last spoke to you. Obviously, we had the game against the Australia-New Zealand selection on Saturday. That was a very comprehensive win, probably the most comprehensive win of the tour so far. Maybe threw up some late boulders for Test match selection. We have the Test match announcement later in the week. I think that's on Thursday when Andy Farrell will finally reveal his hand. And there's also been a number of kind of call-ups over the last, 5 or 6 days. It's gotten people talking as well. We've had Jamie Osborne, Tom Clarkson, Jamie George, and 3 Scots as well. How has that been received?
I don't think the Australians have noticed, but there's been a lot of chat in the media about it. I thought the way they did it was very strange in that, yes, fair enough, call up Jamie George when Luke Cowan-Dickie gets injured. Yes, call up Jamie Osborne because you're worried about, well, we didn't know they were worried about Gary Ringrose, but they were worried about Gary Ringrose and they're worried about Matt Hansen as well. Makes sense. But then they just called up Thomas Clarkson on his own, which meant the whole of social media, rugby social media, just broke down in a wave of anti-Leinster. This is an Ireland 2023 or 2027 training run thing. And to be honest, I thought it was very funny. And I can make a very strong case that Thomas Clarkson is the next in line. It was unfair and funny at the same time to watching people melt down. But then the next day they called up 3 Scots. And if they just called up the 3 Scots along with Thomas Clarkson, Thomas Clarkson, they would have saved Thomas Clarkson so much hassle and a whole issue gone. And it would have been, I think what he's tried to do is basically not call up 6 people all at once because it would have been accused of being a Geography 6 again. But they've overthought it and it's kind of weird. So it was a big talking point yesterday. Was it even a big? It's nowhere near as big as it was with that Geography 6 in 2017. I think but the focus is more being on why are they playing another game that they're going to win by 70 points in Australia in the middle of the Test series, and people understand why Andy Farrell is calling up these players. I mean, there is definitely an argument that cheapens the jersey if you're bringing in 2 lads next week for like 3 days and then sending them home. Like John DL, the forwards coach was up yesterday, he said these players could go home almost as soon as they arrive, which is just, that's not the Lions. Like the whole Lions is supposed to be tired and you're supposed to have to back up. And Andy Farrell's Mr. Adversity, and he said that when we first went on this kind of routine of midweek games and he was like, this is proper touring. But really all he's done since is kind of complain about the schedule, and now he's bringing in a load of extra players so his players are protected for the Test series. But that's what he's here to win, and it's not a really big issue. The bigger issue today is that Matt Hansen's is injured and Gary Ringrose out of the Test series. That the selection, that's what people are talking about around the Lions. Really, yesterday that was the big story, but really the big story is Tom Lyon is probably going to play 10 for the Wallabies. 28 years after his dad played for the Wallabies against the Lions in 1989. Those are the things that are probably hitting home here, but still, it doesn't feel like the Australians are paying attention just yet.
Yeah, Luke, what's your view on all those call-ups? Rudd outlined them there. Like the way it was announced kind of made it seem maybe a little stranger than it was, but you've obviously been in Lions squads. Like it's not ideal to have kind of one last midweek game once the Test series has started. I feel like once the Test starts, it might make more sense to just focus on those and not have other matches kind of causing maybe these issues where more players are needed. I don't know what your view on the whole scheduling and the call-ups are.
Yeah, well, I don't know, that midweek game saved the series for me personally. So yeah, I probably have a bit of a different view on that, and maybe I'd have got it anyway because it was such a blow up in Test 1 for my kind of the guys I was competing in a position with. Yeah, I don't know. I'm less sure that I did think it was interesting. dark enough thought did come through my mind, kind of echoing Rudd's sentiment about cheapening the jersey a little bit. I did look at some of the names and kind of think, like, I don't know, just a little bit not. I just such a harsh thing to say. Like some really good players, but don't know, just didn't feel like
Lions.
Maybe like quality sometimes. That you look at this Lions squad, you go, yeah, like there's 35 like absolute stomping players in form, like really, really high quality players. It doesn't have that. I don't know. It doesn't have that feel to me. Is that being really harsh? I feel like I'm being really harsh. I don't know. And I just look at some of the names. I'm kind of going like, is that a Lions player? Like, based off.
I think that's what happens though that's what happens, Luke, when you go to 44 players.
I know. I'm just echoing your sentiment. I was kind of going like, well, yeah. It's been in the back of my mind, and I going, am I just being like one of those ex-pros? Just have I improved so much in my own head that I'm kind of going like, oh, this guy, like, is he actually? Do you know that kind of way? And like, listen, like, whatever about my career. I just, if you look at the squad in from the tour I was on, I was kind of thinking like, is there a weak? There's not one weak player there. Like, not one of them went on to have like an average career. I don't think. And I feel like there might be a few who might be in that camp. It's such a harsh thing to say, but I don't know. Maybe I feel awful having said that. It's like a dark thought that was in my head all week when I saw some of the call-ups. I'm still not sure about that person as an international rugby player. So it just feels unusual that they're on a Lions tour. So yeah, it's a weird place to be. I'd rather we weren't talking about it. There's definitely been some odd selections, I think, and the timing of them has felt a little bit unusual, I think. So yeah, it's been an unusual couple of days, I think, and yeah, I'm kind of watching closely. I think once we get into the test series, I think all of this we won't be talking about it, and I'd rather we were talking about some of the more interesting ones from last weekend. I think there were some really interesting performances that might change the complexion of the test team. So I'm hoping we're going to get onto that. But yeah, just that's the point that stood out to me when you were talking, Rhodes, that I've kind of been maybe hiding. I was like thinking I wouldn't say anything, but now I think I'll piggyback in.
Yeah, because like there's last thing on this, and then we can move on to the test team, talking points and stuff like that. But I feel like it's kind of, there's two things happening at the same time. Like the reason that none of the Australian internationals, or very few of them, have played in any of the warm-up games is because now it's just not really feasible for like international players to be released like very close to the test series, I don't think. And similarly, Andy Farrell is reluctant to play any of his test guys in this midweek game. So it almost necessitates them to kind of use different players, and it does kind of cheapen it if that is the outlook, because you'd like to see maybe the guys who were on the bench for the first test, like Luke said in 2009, go out and get a chance to impress and maybe force their way into the test team. But that doesn't seem to be the way Andy Farrell, Joe Schmidt, or any international coach involved in any Lions series in the last while has looked at it.
Yeah, but that's supposed to be what makes the Lions different. This isn't supposed to be any other international team, but really covering this Lions team, it has felt like covering an international team. Kind of felt like covering Ireland, really, with a couple of English lads thrown in. And they're really not making any, I wrote about this last Saturday, they're not really making any effort to make it different, other than the fact that they're playing more games and they're 4 teams coming together, which obviously is unique in its own self. But they would call themselves a performance team, not a touring team. They would, they see it all that matters to them. And maybe this is what you have to do if you want to win a series, which the Lions haven't managed to do as often as they would like. Is you have to maybe this is the sacrifice you have to make, that you lose some of the romance in order to win a test series. And they're talking about Henry Pollock's come out 3-0. He was backed up by Maro Itoje on Monday. They want to win this 3-0. They want to be an unbeaten Lions team in Australia, and that's all they care about. Like they are doing the bare minimum when it comes to community work, when it comes to media. It's all performance, and that will be fine if they win. But they have made themselves a little bit hostages to fortune, because I don't think the Australian people have any regard for this team. They're not leaving much of a legacy in terms of off-field stuff. And I know that's hard to do when you've got 2 games a week and you're professional players at the end of a long season. But they have very explicitly just gone, we are here to do one thing. We're here for one job. That's our mission. We're going to do it. And if calling up a couple of Scottish guys from there who are nearby and putting them on the bench, and Thomas Clarkson and Jamie Osborne, and putting them, in fairness, Osborne's closer to the test team than they'd like, because they've so many injuries in his areas. But they'll be all on the bench, and then they'll probably just go home. They're here for a couple of days and they're gone. And Mauro Itoje said they'll be made welcome, but I say it's gonna be hard for them to feel welcome if they know they've got a boarding pass for Wednesday or Thursday. You'd like to think to let them hang around for the weekend to go to one of the test games, but there's no guarantees of that. So it's just, I think that the Lions sell a myth of themselves, and it's not a myth. They have a lore and they have a legacy that goes back to Luke's team, to '97, Willie John McBride, all the way back to 1888, and they wear that 1888 on their tops. But they've taken a very clinical and professional approach here in Australia. And that's all with the intention of getting the results that so many Lions teams have struggled to get, albeit they're coming up against a host nation that most Lions teams probably would have beaten, because it's probably one of the worst one of the worst host teams that they'll ever have come up against. So it's in an unusual place here, like I think, this tour, and it needs a really good first test.
Yeah, look, what's your sense of the first test we're going to get? Like, I find it hard to know exactly like where the Lions are, in the sense that they, like, the test team, or the team we think might be the test team, hasn't played a huge amount together. They played against the Brumbies, or the bulk of it, we think. Australia have had one warm-up game against Fiji. They haven't been together besides that since last November. So while the Lions are favourites on paper, I'm still kind of like a little curious as to what kind of game we might get this weekend. Like you mentioned, like last Saturday, and guys you thought might maybe making kind of a late charge for the test team, which maybe adds a little bit of intrigue to it as well.
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? Like, I think I think you're right. It probably will be the bulk of those kind of that Brumbies team will probably make up the test team, but that's 10 days ago, so that's not exact for a team that's kind of hasn't played together much. That is a while ago, I think. So there's that dynamic that you're probably that's working against you, maybe slightly, or maybe it's working for you. I don't know. Maybe you get to, you kind of 8 days probably of real training to really sort that out, or probably 7 days really, because you're taking one away at the end for rest as well. But you're trying to organize yourself over that period. That's probably a decent period to go and do that, if you feel like that's probably the team you're going to go out with. So I thought a few guys played well over the weekend. Keen to chat about that too. I'm sure we'll get to it, but yeah, that dynamic is interesting. I think the Australian one is also interesting. The 10 situation really does impact maybe how we think they're going to play. I mean, Lion is very kind of inexperienced, but the one thing about Joe Schmidt that probably does help someone who's in that scenario is that the game plan is very structured and organized. If you can deliver on those things, if you can take in all the information, which in France they're going to have plenty of time to go and do in training. If you can do that, he can kind of manage a fairly average out half, I think, through a game by just doing exactly as he's told, because he will give you more information than most other coaches would. And also everyone around you will probably have more information. So if they can digest that and they can deliver what Joe wants, I think they'll be very, very competitive. And I think this Lions team is, I don't know. I think I still see some things that I feel like could be exposed personally, and I think Joe can do that. So the big challenge, I think, is probably going to be around set piece, particularly the scrum. I wonder how the Aussies will do. I don't think they'll be as bad as any of the midweek teams, but that's the Lions have been really, really good in that area. So can they contain them there? Can they manage them? Will be really, really key for the Aussie team, because they put massive pressure on themselves if they can't do that, if they can't manage that part of the game. But the rest of the game, I mean, I'd expect the Aussies to defend better than the teams the Lions have been facing, and I'd also expect them to attack a little bit better as well. I think they'll have better players, better athletes, and I don't know. I think this could be very competitive first test, actually. Provided they can deliver on those things. And I think Joe always has a history of getting teams who maybe haven't played a massive amount of rugby to actually generally produce something pretty good. Like he generally has really good ideas. He's very innovative, and he's very, very good at delivering kind of the messages about the important parts of the game that will really help you against the team. So that was always my experience of him, and I think I'd be kind of cautious of them. I think they could put out a big performance without many of us really thinking that this was going to be anyway competitive.
Yeah, Rud, like, what's your sense of where Australia are at? I know you were at kind of their press earlier in the week. They put forward Will Skelton, Joseph Suaalii, like kind of two of their big stars who need to play really, really well, you'd think, for Australia to have a chance of springing an upset. Like, The one game we saw, as I mentioned, against Fiji, they were fairly dire, lucky to get out of jail with the victory. So they didn't even have like
dire is harsh. Will, like, if it's like, I think Fiji are a good team, and they were really good for 39 minutes, and then they made a really bad error just before halftime. Lolasio, who they're kind of sweating over him missing the series, but they had the ball for 4 or 5 phases on their own halfway line in injury time. I think they were 14-3 up against Fiji. And rather than get the ball off the pitch, he tried to chip and chase against Fiji. Like, they caught the ball, ran it back, scored a try, and they panicked after that. And I think if the Lions get them in a position where they're they can put like a scoreboard pressure on, they're going to really struggle, these Australians. But in fairness to them, they came back and they won the game, and it was their first outing of the year. So their first test match since they played in Dublin last November. So I think there was a little bit of an allowance can be made on that as well. So I think they're very dangerous because they're in a position where everyone is writing them off. I'm doing it. I'm guilty of it. And I give them a real shot in this first test in particular. They have no pressure on their shoulders, unlike the Lions, who have put incredible pressure on themselves and have all the pressure of being who they are and being, like, I think last time I looked, the line was something like 8 or 9 points. So everyone expects them to win on Saturday and win this series. So Joe is coming in. He's out the gap at the end of the year. So, he's doing his best. He can walk away from this job knowing that he has raised Australia rugby up from ground zero and will hand it over in a better place. And if he loses, everyone will say, well, you did your best, because, where you were, you went out of the pool stages of World Cup. It will be unrealistic for you to beat the Lions at this stage, as long as they go well. The players, they looked really relaxed. They were like, the Lions media stuff is so serious. And then Skelton marches in, like, he's so big. It's quite remarkable when you see him in the flesh. And then Sue Ali is beside him like his little brother. And Sue Ali is just this kind of matinee idol. Chocolate, like, they love him. They lap up everything he said. He is the rugby league convert. I don't know if it was in the front page, but there was a GQ feature last month. Joseph Suaalii, the man who's going to save Australian rugby. And he doesn't, this doesn't weigh heavily on him at all. If it doesn't work out, he can always go back and play league again. He could probably be a model. He's just got life sorted out for himself. And he was talking about his pre-match routines where he walks around the pitch in his bare feet and does some mindfulness. And he's just like, this guy's going to do something, So there's a zen about them and a relaxedness, or a relaxed kind of feeling from them that suggests to me that they're kind of seeing this as an opportunity and a free hit, and they feel like they're being underestimated, and they're quite happy about that. And they'll let the Lions talk about 3-0s and build themselves up, and let us in the UK and Irish media build them up, and they reckon they can knock them off. So I think it's going to be a ferocious first test. I think the Lions will try and bully them physically, and I think the Wallabies will go after their breakdown, go after them in the air. And Joe is a master of both of those areas. So they have a very, very clever, very, very effective head coach who is an expert in the areas where the Lions look most vulnerable. And, Paul O'Connell was brought in to fix Ireland's breakdown using the Joe Schmidt method a couple of years ago. Well, he's not here. John Fogarty's looking after the breakdown here. And no slide on John Fogarty, but he's also looking after the scrum. So, the fact that their breakdown is struggling, I wonder, have they missed the trick in not having a specialist breakdown coach? And they haven't done much training, so they've time to fix it. There's lots for Schmidt to pick at with this Lions squad, because they haven't really delivered a complete performance. So I don't know what the question was you asked me, because I've talked so long, so I struggled to sum it up. But
don't worry, it was all interesting. It was all interesting.
It was all good.
It's a very dangerous game, I guess, is where I'd sum it up.
I'm even looking at, it's funny, the Suaalii kind of point about what he could bring and his X factor. Even look back to 2013, like Israel Folau was in that role, and in that first test he was devastating. Like, one of the reasons it was so close, Folau, I think, scored 2 tries and was an absolute handful. So if Suaalii can have a similar impact, it would definitely go a long way to tipping the scales in Australia's favour. Luke, in terms of the line selection and some of the talking points there, you wanted to kind of tee up a few lads who you felt did do well on Saturday. Anyone in particular you think is coming with a late charge?
I thought Byrne played pretty good. Weirdly, I thought James Ryan got literally not one mention in commentary, but everything he did, I thought he was unbelievably good.
You're the one pundit I think who's been flying the flag for James Ryan consistently.
But everything he did, he was really good at the line out. His breakdown work, he was so violent at the breakdown. I was, when you're watching the game, you're like, it's funny, the same people, like, you know, particularly in the different sides of the water, they're watching the same people pumping up their own guys. And maybe there's a bit of that going on with me. But I thought he went about his work really well. I thought Owen Farrell should have been on this tour from the start. I thought he came on and just showed that little bit of class. He just, you know, the grubber in behind, the slick hands down the short side, just really good. Some nice defensive work too. I'm a big believer that I don't think he's a world-class 12. I think he's a world-class 10. And I think sometimes defensively, he's not really a sticker in the tackle. He hits hard, but he doesn't stick many tackles, which I don't really love for my 12. But he's a brilliant player, like really top class. And I thought he looked like a really experienced, classy international player when he came on the pitch. So I wonder would he be able to force his way in. Not sure he gets in for the first test, but I think for the second test, maybe he's a realistic shot there. I thought Finn Smith, guys, was really good. I have heard like no mention. That seems to just have been a foregone conclusion, that 10 battle. And I actually think I really like him. I really think he's a really good player. And I was surprised he didn't get much of a mention. I thought that there was some really good, like, I mean, Tuipulotu, like, he's just excellent, isn't he? Like, I think he's a bit of a shoe-in. I thought that was going to be maybe a closer battle between himself and Aki, because I thought Aki actually played better than him against Argentina, but Tuipulotu was very good. And I thought Keenan, thank God, I was really pleased for him. I thought he had a really settled display at fullback. He looked really good. He had some nice kicking interventions. He covered the ground brilliantly well. Some lovely attacking play. Obviously, he was so switched on for that kind of first try opportunity. So, like lots of good things and lots of those people. I think Keenan's obviously with Kinghorn's situation, and I think Keenan is probably more likely to start that first test now, because I think Kinghorn is he gone, or is he? It feels like I haven't got an update on him for that first test, but
he didn't train. He didn't train today. They say he could train tomorrow, but they've already picked
my
the team,
sense is that he's on the edge for them roads. Yeah, so that's interesting to hear you say that. Yeah, so look, I think Keenan for me showed what he's all about. Classy operator. Still think there was a little bit in the air where I feel like if I was Joe Schmidt and I've got Sue Elihi in my team, I'm thinking, I think I'm going to be testing them out in the air. I still felt like they haven't dealt with some of the competition up there unbelievably well. Like, there hasn't been, there were some really good kicks, by the way, and they were very competitive in the air. Like, there were, you know, it's a jumble of bodies there in the air, but at the same time, you'd still want maybe the Lions, and Hugo usually would take one or two more of them, and you're kind of going, like, you expect a few of them to break to go just be mess. I think that just happens there because the way they've kind of the rules have gone. But I still think Keenan on a good day probably gets one or two more of them, and that's an area where Joe will be all over. So hopefully he can kind of if he's in the test team, he ties that up and maybe gives a little bit more certainty there. But I did think he covered the ground brilliantly well. So really pleased for him. And I thought some of his ball play was brilliant. Like some of the releasing of the outside backs from Keenan, like under pressure. I thought he did some of that really well as well. So disappointed for Hansen. I hope he's not completely gone. I thought he was excellent. Like, again, involved in lots of really good stuff and floating around the pitches. I think Farrell really likes that with his wingers. He likes them to be involved heavily in the game. And I thought Hansen was doing that. So hopefully that's not too serious an injury. So lots to unpack there. By the way, another one I want to mention, Earl. I'd have Earl in ahead of Pollock in my on the bench. I think. I know everyone thinks Pollock should be in, and everyone cannot stop talking about him, which annoys me a little too. But I thought Earl was outstanding. Like, he's so physical, the footwork at times. The one off the kickoff, it was sloppy to drop that one, but geez, he's magic, and he just looks a little bit more built and ready for international rugby than Pollock. I feel like Pollock won't have the same impact against an international team. I think in a year or two he might, but I think he's more suited to he's like a top class interpro, if you know what I mean. Like, he's kind of that level to me, like a really good club player, really, but like international, will he have the same impact? Not straight away, I don't think. And I think we saw a little bit of that against Argentina, if I'm being honest. Maybe that's colouring my mind a little bit, but I think it'll be the same against Australia. So I think Earl would be, I probably prefer to have him on the bench, if I'm being honest. I think he's so dynamic. I love the bit of footwork. He can change a game up for you. I think you get the same thing out of him, but he's just more experienced and just looks a little more battle hardened. So lot of stuff there, guys, I know, but it was a good game. I thought the Lions found out a few things about who should be in their test team.
Yeah, well, I saw Ugo Monye and Sam Warburton both had Ben Earl at number 8 in their test teams. So just, we're picking them ahead of Jack Conan.
Yeah, well, that's wrong. That's silly. But he has been very good. But no, in your test team, you got to have Conan. Conan's been excellent on the tour so far as well.
Yeah, Rud. So, what's your sense of who's nailed on, which positions are still up for grabs? If you're just kind of spinning through a test team at the moment.
Well, I would say that jerseys 1, 5, 6, 7, and 12 are open, and I would have the rest of it locked in. So that opens up a couple of the people that Luke talked about there, because Joe McCarthy obviously had a really good opener against Western Force and has played really well over here. But Tyke Byrne, I think, is firmly still in that mix, having played really well on Saturday. Andy Farrell has named him captain a couple of times, and you could say, well, he's just made him the midweek captain, midweek in inverted commas, because obviously that's been inverted on this tour. But I don't think that's the case. I think he talks about him in terms of his breakdown work all the time and how important he is. And every time Andy Farrell has coached Ireland in the last couple of years and Tyke Byrne has been available, he started him. He's a massively important player. He's been a massively important player. And I know that's complicated when Maro Itoje is your actual captain and you have to play players from other countries in your team. But I think Byrne is really important to him, and it's just whether he pits him at 5 or 6. Chesham missed training last week. I think he's supposed to be back on the pitch this week. He went well, but he doesn't know that role as well as Tyke Byrne. So I suspect it might be McCarthy with Tyke Byrne at 6, even though I don't think Byrne is as effective as he used to be in that role. I think they'll trust him to get up to the speed of this game because he's played in so many tests within the system for Andy Farrell over the years. So that's how I think they'll go, but that's just based on my own reading of the situation and kind of little bit of guesswork.
Sorry, my understanding, he's going to go with Byrne at 5 or at 6? Sorry,
6. I think McCarthy 5, Byrne 6. Yeah, I think McCarthy's done enough. I think James Ryan has been really unlucky that he picked up an injury in the URC final, and he's just been playing catch up ever since. And there isn't, if you're going in against a team that's going to target your breakdown, Ryan is an incredible rooker. He hits rooks first. He gets to the ball. And it's been a big problem over here is that they haven't been, probably because they're second guessing the system. Like Ireland under Joe at the start, and even Andy Farrell in the first year. When the sense I have, and you know this better than I do, Luke, when you're trying to learn a new system or a new playbook or playing a team that you haven't played in before, you're thinking about it all the time. And it's stuff that's natural and instinctive to you, such as when someone goes to deck, get there first. You're often thinking about your next role, where you're supposed to be. There's designated cleaners, there's stuff that's way more complicated than I understand involved in it. And if they're not quite sure on their roles, they're going to struggle to be ahead of Fraser McWright, who's going to turn them over, which he did against Ireland 4 or 5 times in November. So
just to tie in on that point, Woods, I think that the really key thing is when you start playing well under these types of systems that require a lot of thinking, right? It's actually when the thinking's done. So all you're worrying about is the important stuff, which is the effort. Am I in the right? It's not have I got my depth right? Is this an effort moment or is it a thinking moment? Do you know that kind of way? And you kind of you just know each moment. Do you know that kind of way? You can just see it happening and just go, okay, it's an effort moment. Okay, it's a thinking moment. Okay, am I here? Where do I sit? And you can break the game up into that very easily. And then it's just delivering on each one. And all your technique and all the stuff that you've done, that's all in you anyway. That stuff just kind of happens. It's whether I should be, am I the second, am I, my second out from the 10 here? Am I taking a trail line off 9, or am I hitting the ruck? Is it effort? Is it boom boom? And then you just see them way quicker. Would be how I would describe it. Sorry, just to tie in on that point.
No, I think that's why when it comes to it, when the pressure's on and it's test week and he's got a 50-50, he's probably going to lean the way of the guy who's done it for him and knows the system. And that's why the Irish guys have always had an advantage coming over here when it came to selection. Now, in terms of the number 1 jersey, he may think, well, I get Genge on with Sheehan and Furlong, and then I have Porter and Kelleher coming on. I have enough lads who know the system in that combination to get me through. And obviously then he has the 10, 12, 13 thing where does he go with Aki and Jones who've played once together, Aki and Tuipulotu who've played once together, or does he go with the Glasgow and Scottish pair who I only Tuipulotu is playing as well as Aki personally, and I think Aki gives you that focal point, and if you want to bully Australia, you pick Bundy Aki because he's just going to go straight and win your gain line. But if you want to play a bit and if you want that inbuilt combination, then you go, well, I'm going to go with the Scots. Now, he has said from the outset that he doesn't see these combinations as being inbuilt from previous, that they are Lions, that he's going to pick the best kind of two players in terms of form. But when it comes down to it, those combinations are really important. And he's always been a cohesion coach. So I suspect he'll go with Tuipulotu and Jones just about. But I think when I predicted my team on Sunday for the paper, I went with Aki, because Aki's so important to what Ireland do and what the Lions do in terms of getting them over the gain line from first phase, and also winning collisions in defence and being a stronger defender, bringing your gain line. So I'm torn a little bit on that one. That's quite open. And 7 is the other one. We talk about breakdown a lot.
The 7 one I find very interesting, because Tom Curry appears to be the favourite, and I'd argue that he's 5th out of the 5 open sides in terms of how they've played across the first 5-6 weeks of the tour. And of all the talk of Ireland, Irish players being favourites, I feel like Tom Curry is probably the most fortunate guy in terms of Test match selection.
I think we know how Andy Farrell selects, and it's not really on form. And what you've done against an AUNZ selection or the Brumbies or the Reds or the Waratahs is only a very small part of what he sees. Firstly, it's training, but also it's what you've done in the past. And Tom Curry's been an exceptional player in World Cup semi-finals. And people don't like the way Andy Farrell picked. They didn't like when he kept going back to Conor Murray and Peter O'Mahony with Ireland because of what they'd done in the game, and Cian Healy. But he felt that was far more what they'd experienced, what they'd done in the game, what they brought in big games. And it's another reason why I think Ty Byrne is probably going to get back in, because he's done it for Andy Farrell before. And I get the sense that Farrell really admires Curry, what he's done in the game. I suspect Owen rates Curry and has told Andy Farrell good things about him. I suspect that he just sees him as one of the best 7s in the world. And just because he's had a couple of bad games, or he hasn't had a bad game necessarily, but he hasn't really shot the lights out. Other players have played better than him. I suspect he's going to give him every chance to play well in the first test, because he offers him that physicality. He is teak tough, but all the other 7s have played better than him in the individual games over here.
Well, he left his best one at home, though, didn't he?
What, Jack Willis?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, it was hard to justify picking when he was going to miss so much of the tour and you had so many other options. I know Blair Kinghorn, there wasn't as many 15, so you could maybe justify that. But it hasn't worked out either. He came having played a lot of rugby and got injured immediately. So I can see why they didn't pick him. I know, as much as I do think he's class.
I think Josh Van Fleur's getting a bit of a raw deal as well. I'm not saying I'm here to advocate having 15 Irish players in the team. But you've got a World Player of the Year from a couple of years ago who's played really well, and he hasn't been great in the deck, but he's made loads of tackles. So he's not able to get over the ball if he's on the ground having made the tackle. He's been the games he started, he's been getting 20 tackles. He's kind of his work rate's been exceptional. He looked really good top of the ground. He's created tries for other people. He should have scored one in the games have all merged together in my head. I think maybe the Brumbies game, he knocked the ball over the line, but largely he's been really, really good. So I think he'll be in the 23, but I just think he's going to get nudged out.
Yeah, Luke,
Morgan's been excellent, though. I really like Morgan. He's very physical. He's great, and he does give you, if it's a tight call, would you go with the Welshie? I probably would. I
don't think Andy Farrell. I can see the argument for that completely, but I think Andy Farrell will go with because of what I said earlier. This is not the way Lions has been run before. This is all about performance, and not that that sounds harsh on Jack Morgan. He's been really good, but I think he'll go back to Tom Curry because of what he's done. In fact, he's played for the Lions before, or he'll go with Josh, who's done it for him before and has done it in bigger games than Jack Morgan. But it's harsh on Jack Morgan. It's he's been good over here, and it will be if you were thinking about the Lions' legacy and all that sort of stuff, the fact that the one Welsh player here has been really good, there is an argument for getting him in there, but that's not the way they're thinking at all. If he gets in there, it'll be because Andy Farrell thinks he's the best player. And in fairness, I don't think Jack Morgan would like to be picked based on his nationality. He'd want
no, but who cares about that? We're just talking about I just mean if it's a tight call, and it's much of a muchness. I kind of my feeling was that. And if you're picking a 6 who's the only thing is, I suppose Tig's going to be all over. If it's Tig, or less so obviously Chesson, if it's Tig, you do have that fetching ability on the ground, but it's nice maybe I think, and if you're picking Conan rather than Earl, you probably say, well, do you know what, really Morgan's probably the best on the ground of probably the lot, I would say. I think and And the one thing I'd say about that, it's interesting. It's such a good debate in that 7 slot, isn't it? It's so competitive there. I think Josh van der Flier, I'm glad you said that, because when you think about the end of the season, I know Leinster were kind of pummeling teams. He was really good with ball in hand. Like, he made some brilliant runs. Like, and even in the through the cup campaign as well. Obviously, not so much against Northampton. I think maybe he got a little bit punished because of how that day went, because we didn't really see him that much in the game. But if you think about the other games leading up to that and the end of the league run, Joshua had made some unbelievable carries. Like some really abrasive, like kind of bursting through guys, look really quick. Some lovely ball handling at times as well. So yeah, like he maybe gives you a little bit of extra dynamism in attack as well. If you're picking someone like Byrne, who probably doesn't give you that carrying wise, but gives you the stuff on the deck, he gives you the stuff with the line out. Do you try and get a little bit more ball carrying in there? Because maybe you have McCarthy, maybe you have maybe you have enough of the kind of big bruisers. You've got Genge, you've got Sheehan. So yeah, maybe there's a balance to be struck there somewhere. I wonder what the balance would be. Is probably the question I'm posing, rather than kind of I'm more amusing about what the coaches' discussion is going to be about how they get the best guys on the pitch and the best team on the pitch, really, for who they select. And I think a lot of it might actually hinge on who they pick at that 6th spot. What the balance is going to be and who they pick at 8.
That's why, look, I think it's interesting that, and we discussed the back row balance a couple of times, but like, he's picked, like, say 5-7s, but he's going with Tom Curry, kind of come what may, seems to be his attitude. So, like, you would think the way he selected the squad, he wanted to bring them all out, play them all, and say, let the best man win. But that doesn't seem to be how it's been selected at all. They stuck the squad full of 7s, but he seems to have made a preconceived decision that I like Tom Curry, I want Tom Curry. So now you're talking about guys like Van der Flier who have had good tours, but don't seem to really be in the reckoning quite to the degree their performances indicate. So I'm just a little perplexed again with how that's been managed.
Well, he hasn't picked them yet, so we can't really hammer him until he's actually picked the team. Because, I mean, he could go with Josh van der Flier, he could go with Morgan, but like it's he has, and like he could be throwing shapes at Joe Schmidt and wanting to change the picture for him on Thursday when he names the team. Like, he could have, because Joe's obviously reading all the same signs we are, and he understands rugby more than I do, and he understands selection patterns. He knows Andy Farrell. He's predicted, he's doing, like, it'll drive him mad that his team has basically appeared in the Australian media 2 days before it was supposed to be named, because the Lions are off analysing Tom Line far more forensically with 2 days' notice than they ever would have at this stage of the week. So, like, there's a chance that Farrell's going to call, like, and he has surprised us loads of times with Ireland in terms of his team selection. Kind of, he's thrown curveballs, and there may be curveballs to come. I mean, we're just, so yeah, I suppose we should hold fire on hammering him for picking Tom Curry until he's actually picked Tom Curry, is what I'm saying. But like, he could play Curry at 6 and it's someone else at 7 and go for Byrne and Itoje in the row, or then it's then there's a couple of locks who've gone very well, he'll miss out. So there's still, I don't have any hard information yet on this. So I think, like, we do have to hold fire a little bit, as hard as that is to do, because it's hard to go too strong on a selection that hasn't been made yet.
Yeah, that's fair. I was just more reading between the lines of him not playing at all at the weekend, and the similar guys in that boat. Like, you're assuming he's involved in some shape or form, but I guess as you say, like, we don't know that for certain.
He's carried it. I think he had a wrist injury at the end of the season as well, and like, his wrist is quite heavily strapped, so that's probably inhibiting what he's like. They're all banged up to some degree at this stage of the season, but so that may be a factor in his performances not being quite where he wants them to be. So and again, like, that's something Farrell will have to weigh up now, as if he is being inhibited, does he go with a player who's kind of looking more like he's in flow, who's in form, in flow, and kind of top of the ground, or does he back the guy that's done it before to get to that level, because it's a test match, because he's a so-called test match animal?
Luke, and we discussed earlier some of the areas we think Joe Schmidt and Australia might go after the Lions in. Like, what would be the top of your list of concerns? Like, if there is going to be an upset on Saturday, what would be the one area you'd be most worried that the Lions might get, kind of exposed in?
I think cleaned out in the air would be my worry. I think I think they'll do okay in the kicking game. I think that's really important. I think Joe will have a good plan for that. I think they'll be okay. I think Lowe probably gets selected, and he's a real weapon for you. I think Keenan is fine there. Like, he's strong in the kicking game. He's strong on covering. He's very fit. I think Freeman has been a little bit, he's only been okay in the air, which I think he's probably most likely to get into that other slot. And I think I just wish the guys had just won a few more of those kind of battles in the air, because I think it's kind of highlighted. It was the one thing I probably watch a lot of rugby games with a Joe Schmidt type head on me in terms of when I'm watching and I'm going, okay, well, I think that's a problem for them there. They haven't really dealt with that so well. I think if I'm planning for a game, I'm thinking, well, that's an area where I'm going directly to. The other area is that I do feel like they can be a little bit vulnerable in the midfield at times, particularly like part of me, they haven't really been unbelievably tested, but I've seen them get split a few times, and I do think that there's a little bit of opportunity there, which maybe I don't know. Maybe I feel like that's and maybe not necessarily the midfielders, but in the midfield, I think you can get to them there, and I think you can get to them on the edges as well. There's probably a few places where I'm kind of thinking, like, if you think about that Aussie New Zealand selection, like they had a few lovely parts of the game where they kind of dragged the Lions up, and the Lions they kind of feel like they're in the middle of coming really hard or coming just kind of settling and managing the attack shape against them in defence. And I thought New Zealand, they got some of the guys that Aussie New Zealand team kind of exposed them one or two times, some lovely passes over the top. And I do wonder, like Tom Wright and these guys, if there's a few nice ball handlers there, a few nice players, a few strong athletes. I think they might get hands free. I think I could see them causing a few issues in that area for the Lions with either balls over the top or through them as well. It sounds like there's holes everywhere in the defense. There isn't, but I just maybe feel like they're caught a little bit. I feel like there's a few guys doing a few different things still, which is a bit of a concern at this stage of it. Now, I know they've chopped and changed the team, and maybe that's why, but just maybe if I was to sum it up at one point, maybe the kind of cohesiveness maybe isn't exactly there in their thinking. And I think there might be opportunities off the back of that in a few different areas. And that's a bit of a mismatch of thinking about 5 games and trying to pick out some of the problems that were caused over the 5 games. But I think Joe will have a more coherent response, but also a more coherent plan than I've just outlined. Not much of a plan.
I think
there is a few holes there. No,
you're completely right, Luke. And I think Joe has been working with the Super Rugby coaches in preparation for the games. And while none of them really came close, I thought the Taz really showed what the Wallabies the way by going on the deck and in the air. And the Brumbies, like Larkham, had some really good strategies in that game. That was what we think is close to the test team that day. And I thought the way they flooded the channel around Russell unsettled him. The scrum half was shooting in that game. And they managed that game terribly, the Brumbies, just a bit like the Wallabies when I was talking about earlier. Like they tried to chip and chase in the edge of their, oh no, it wasn't. It was an offload forward. There was a chip and chase in the edge of their own 22. They did some silly stuff that undermined the good stuff, but there was good stuff there and better players in a more cohesive international team who were able to play at an intensity that the Lions haven't faced since that Argentina game, which is a worry, I think, for the Lions, that they're not, are they going to be able to, are they sleepwalking into this in terms of, they think they're great because they've beaten all the Super Rugby teams or and they haven't played at that level of intensity? If the Wallabies hit them with everything they've got in that first 20 minutes, does that stun the Lions and put them in a bit of a hole? Early, they haven't looked good. The set piece is really good. The line-out's been improving steadily as it's gone on. The scrum has been good, but the breakdown has been a problem. Every time you talk to them, they're giving out about the breakdown and how they're not winning their own ball, and they're allowing themselves to be slowed down, and Gibson Park's having to dig for it. And we know that Joe is going to go after him there, and he has a real weapon in McWright, and Harry Wilson's pretty good over the ball as well. So there's avenues and there's buttons for Joe to push, and we know also that he will have something that they don't know is coming, like he did in the World Cup quarter-final. The way he defended it kind of just sat off Sam Prendergast in the game last November and just said, okay, you go what he did to Ireland in the quarterfinal, he repeated with Australia, sit off, let them go wide and then attack their breakdown out wide where they're not able to resource it as quickly. They know that's coming because he's done it to them before, but there's we know that he will have things in his back pocket that we haven't seen yet. And it's just whether his players are good enough to deliver on them and to unsettle these lines enough to get them to get Australia into a commanding position. I do need the Lions of a better bench, and we'll have stronger options coming off the bench. So across 80 minutes, you'd expect them to be strong. But it's whether, I think there has to be Joe's teams always are better as front runners. They need to get ahead. They need to cause doubt in the Lions' mind. They need to, unsettle their confidence and just get the Australian crowd behind them, all these nebulous things, but also score when they have chances and take their chances and all that sort of stuff. And then
the
put
only
pressure
thing
on
is,
that
though,
one.
Rud, with the getting ahead, with the Aussies, I would agree with you over Joe's career. But if you think about this Aussie team, you think the England match, even the Fiji match, they're good. They've got fighting them.
Don't go away,
Like,
yeah.
They won't go away. They could pip you. I agree with you, though, in principle. It's just more an observation of maybe some of the recent results, and you're kind of going, oh, well, they've got a bit of fight in them. You know what I mean? They've got it. Well, sorry, fight is probably a bit condescending. They've got a bit of belief. They kind of keep going. There's no, and you have to have a little of that belief in yourself to be able to continue on and continue trying and bring yourself back into games where it's looking a little bit hopeless or things are going against you. So, yeah, I just wouldn't be writing them off. And then you've got guys like Skelton. I think could make a massive difference at scrum time, and maybe that's negated. That Lions have been able to rely on that throughout the tour, where they're going to go, well, look, this is going well. If there's a knock on, it's not the end of the world, and they've been making lots of handling errors. But maybe this time they won't be able to capitalize on that. There's no penalty coming. Do you know that kind of way? So there's a few bits I can kind of see. That's obviously more experienced front row as well. So you wouldn't expect them to have a few solutions against this Lions pressure.
They're a good scrummaging team. Like this, the Australia of 12 years ago, where Corbisiero won the third test through the scrum. They're not that team anymore. They have a tight five that's able to cope with pretty much anyone, and I don't expect that to be a massive. I think the Lions will have a good scrum as well, but I think that's going to be a fair and even contest. And they're coached by Mike Cron, who essentially wrote the rule book for scrummaging when he was World Rugby scrummaging director, the kind of all black scrum guru, who Joe very, very cannily recruited to work with them. So they're in a very strong position in terms of intel and connections. And I think it's very strange that the Lions didn't bring a referee down with them. In a world where Rassie Erasmus has Jaco Piper on the payroll, in a world where France have Jerome Garces working as part of their backroom team, Joe will have A or U referees in training on a regular basis. The Lions don't have a ref down here at training. And I would say that might be an area, and their discipline's been a bit harem-scarum. There's been games where they've kind of conceded consecutive penalties. They've backed up penalty upon penalty, and they've kind of compounded errors. In a test match arena, again, when you're facing a level of intensity that you haven't faced in 4 weeks, I think how many assistant coaches do they have? They probably could have afforded to, if 91 or 92 people in their backroom team or in their traveling party, they probably could have invited Andrew Brace to come or something, just to kind of to ref the. Chris Busby might have liked it as a retirement present or something, like come down and ref a few line sessions. Like I think that's a miss. Even get a local guy in. Like I've asked that, they said they don't have refs in training, and that's unusual for an international team. So just a small little 0% or a 1%er that I guarantee you Joe has had refs in and will be working very heavily on that side as well.
Rud, I did see a few comments from Ian Foster after the game at the weekend, kind of talking about the mentality of some of the players and their, World Cup performances or inability to get further at the World Cup. And it is an interesting one. It's not something I'd really considered, I suppose, going into the series. The Lions are big favourites. There's a lot of Irish guys there who, when they've been big favourites before for matches, haven't always delivered. What did you make of those comments? And do you think there's anything to them? Do you think, as you said there, and you and Luke both alluded to, like if Australia do get kind of a bit of a foothold, will the old demons for some of these players come back up on their shoulder?
Well, this is how the rest of the world sees us, Will. Sometimes the truth hurts. Ian Foster, that was before the game. He did an interview with Will Kelleher in the Times, and Will mentioned it to me because behind seeing him around the place, he said Ian Foster had a few interesting things about to say about the Irish, so I made sure I went out and read it. The All Blacks coaches always like just pushing even though they're not involved in this series, he'd no hesitation in getting involved and putting a bit of pressure on the Irish players and kind of highlighting their record in World Cup quarterfinals and their inability to get it done in pressure moments. And talking to Will Skelton, I asked Will Skelton about it yesterday, and he's obviously been part of a La Rochelle team who've come from big scores down to beat Leinster in finals, not so much recently, but in those two big games. Like, there is a perception out there that these Irish players, when the going gets tough, and it may be unfair, but because Ireland has never qualified for a World Cup quarter-final, it's out there, and Ian Foster was definitely playing on that. I'm not sure it's going to penetrate I'm not sure how many of the Lions are Times subscribers. And I'm not sure Andy Farrell will mind too much, but until they get the job done, and I think that's probably part of Farrell's thinking over here. Win a line series with these players, it will put them in a much better position for the 2027 World Cup. But yeah, it was interesting that Foster decided to launch a little grenade into things when he's got nothing to do with these games. And I tried to ask him about his cut and paste comment when he said that Ireland had a cut and paste attack after the game, but he backtracked on that one a little bit and was very complimentary about Andy Farrell's game plan. So there was no dice, but yeah, that was an interesting comment that he made before the game.
Yeah, Luke, what's your perspective on that? Any kind of mental hang-ups, do you think, with some of these players ahead of a very pressurised test series?
No, I don't think so. Maybe I'm living in hope after the league win that they finally got across the line, and that'll just banish all the demons. I've kind of been banging that drum for a while, so may as well stick to what I've been saying. Look, the pressure will be amped up. I think Joe. I just have a belief in him, in his ability to find ways to put you under pressure. Over the course of 80 minutes. So they will be tested. But on the flip side, I always feel like Andy Farrell has been able to get the teams through those points. Like, I think they did get fairly killed after that New Zealand game, but I felt like some of the it was a little bit harsh. I think they still probably should have. I'm not going to go back and have a commentary on that, but I always felt it was a little bit harsh, that the kind of the rhetoric around that game. It kind of gave New Zealand no credit and Ireland pretty much. I felt like a lot of the chat was they pumped up Ireland too much, and a lot of it was around people who didn't really know what they were talking about in terms of rugby. A lot of that kind of bandwagony type support for Ireland about how they should definitely have been beating New Zealand at that stage of the competition. It was literally a one-score game, and Ireland were pressuring them for the last kind of 10, 15 minutes. And I feel like there's been Leinster probably have contributed to that, but there's plenty of guys who aren't Leinster there in this Lions team. And I think the guys who are there are top quality operators. So no, I don't expect there to be any hiccups. I think I'd be like one thing I would say is, like, Joe is super experienced. And you look at that coaching staff, there's some good guys there. Like, Jeff Parling has a great reputation, really good reputation for detail. I remember all the guys saying that when he was on the tour down under with them, they were really impressed with him. I think he's obviously gone on to some good stuff as a coach as well. I really like, so they can put them under pressure at line. I can see places where they can upset the Lions, and I don't know if that's down to Lions mindset or people not being. It could just be good coaching and some decent players putting them under pressure. So, not that I'm giving them a way out here, but I'm just saying there's always some good people in an international rugby team that are either coaching against you and playing against you. So people thinking that this is going to be all one-way traffic, I would say that's naive. Would be how I would respond to that, Will. And I think it's for them to be under pressure and maybe for this to be a tight game when they're kind of clear enough favourites. That wouldn't be a surprise to me, and I wouldn't count that as, like, if they lost the game by a point or two, I wouldn't count that as a blow up completely. It could be down to a really good Australian performance against a team that is, to my mind, they have some gaps in around selection. I haven't loved how the squad has been selected, but I still think they have enough to win. I still am thinking they're going to win it, but I just am cautious about, like, saying guys aren't winners or guys aren't up to it at the top level. Just because of some of the stuff that's gone about. So this is a different team. It's a great coaching staff, and there's good players on the other side, which can upset you, and maybe you don't play your best stuff. I could see that.
Okay, I think it's a decent rebuttal to Ian Foster.
Well, you don't have to be a complete bottler. I feel like there's been, it seems so binary to me. Some of the commentary after some of those big games, you know what I mean? And that has never really felt right to me. Yes. Some of those big games, they haven't brought their best stuff, and they've nearly saved their worst performance of the season for some of those games. But remember, like, when you're coming to those stages, you're playing against good guys too, and good coaches. So that's always something that's worth remembering, I think.
Yeah. All right, we'll finish with predictions then. I'm expecting the Lions to get the job done. I know we haven't seen the team selection, but we have a good idea of it as we discuss. I think it'll be close, though. I do think Joe will have a good game plan. I do think he'll make things difficult. I don't think the Lions have played great. So insofar as I think they have a stronger team and a stronger bench, still a little unsure as to how it'll all come together. I do think they'll have enough. I think it might be similar to 2013, actually, in that the Lions kind of squeak one out in the first test, but it might be a lot closer than people think. Rod, what's your perspective? How do you think it'll go?
Yeah, there's an awful lot of parallels with 2013, actually. And I think the first test there was Suncorp as well. And Suncorp is seen as kind of the home of kind of Australia's home ground. And it'll be probably, it's kind of the steep bank stadium. It'll be loud. It'll be noisy. I'm hoping it's going to be like, we haven't had a good atmosphere over here, so I'm really hoping that it's going to be a completely different kettle of fish, because the games themselves over here, like Australia's been a great country to tour, but the games themselves have been a bit underwhelming. I'm expecting it to be full noise on Saturday. I don't see how you could predict an Australia win. I think they'll be competitive. I think they can pick them off absolutely in the way any good team is coached, as Luke has outlined. But if you're weighing up the two teams and kind of listing them side by side and going through the different areas, yes, I can see areas that the Wallabies can get on top of them. I can see kind of the different tactics that Joe could pull out. But if you're calling it just now and saying, okay, which is the better collection of players, which is has the stronger units in terms of like the tight five, in terms of the back row, halfbacks, far more experience, centres, maybe that's 50-50, back three. I think the Lions, like if they can turn what's on paper into a performance, which is always the challenge with the Lions, that's they should win. And then you're rolling off that bench, which would be far more, they've got more depth, obviously, because they're drawing from four nations, three of whom are ranked higher than Australia at the moment. So you've got Andy Farrell in charge, you've got a high power coaching ticket, you've got every resource under the sun, they're unbeaten in Australia. Like they are overwhelming favourites for a reason, and they should win. And if they don't do 3-0, I think they've underachieved on this tour.
Interesting. Luke, I'll give you the last word then. What do you reckon?
I think the spread's probably right at 8 or 9. I think the bench is the key part for me. That probably is the big differentiator. Agree with your points on the team being prepped. Like I see a world where they don't get the same scrum dominance, particularly for the first 50 minutes, 60 minutes, but I think the bench will have an impact at that juncture. I could see Jeff Parling do a good job on the line out, actually. So that could be messy. I could see a world where Joe Schmidt gets on top with a good kicking game, and Sue Lee has a few big moments there, causes some chaos. A home international match that always amps up a team. You don't want to embarrass yourself in front of your family or friends, all that kind of stuff. So you expect the physicality to be kind of rife, and the Lions breakdown hasn't been unbelievable. So they're all the areas I could see problems, potential problems, and ways for routes into the game for Australia. But the key thing is going to be, in my opinion, is going to be the bench. I think that's where I see a big differentiator. I see impact there for the Lions. I just don't see it with Australia. And that means that they've kind of back up, 380 minutes as, probably there's probably 20 guys you're going to say are really top quality players. The Lions are going to have, no matter who they pick, they'll have 23 top quality guys, and the guys coming on the pitch will make an impact. And that's what Joe will be battling against, is that kind of it'll be a resources thing for me. That'll probably be the biggest differentiator between the teams, because I think he'll come up with a good plan. So, hoping that's the case, hoping it's a tight enough game and maybe the Lions squeak a try at the end and we're kind of saying, wow, that was a real battle. And obviously hoping that kind of gives the Australians confidence coming into the last two games of the series. And we're all kind of, saying hopefully, Lions 3-0, but that it was an absolute belter of a test series. And, that all the kind of, I suppose all the negativity that's kind of gone around this kind of publicity-wise, this tour about the quality of the Australians, that we kind of all put that to bed and say, well, that was a really intriguing test match. You could see both teams going at it, picking weaknesses out in each other and causing each other, a bit of hassle. And then hopefully we see a few of the stars showing what they're all about. Your Suolihis, your James Lowe's. We're talking about these guys at the end of it. Toje with a monster effort, Skelton like with some marauding runs, etc. So they're all the things I'm hoping to see and expecting to see. And hopefully I'm not disappointed.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of summing it up. Like, it's been 8 years since we saw a Lions test in front of fans, so it's been a long time coming. So I know it's maybe we think the Lions are big favourites, but I'm expecting it to be a good game. So yeah, really looking forward to it. Rod, Luke, thanks so much for joining me.